Okay, good morning still, 11 o'clock, on time. It's my pleasure to introduce the two moderators for our fantastic panel this morning. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mary E. Smith. Most of you know Dr. Smith. She's been a staff member at the Higher Education Coordinating Board since 1987 and now serves as the Assistant Deputy Commissioner for Academic Planning and Policy. In this role, she's responsible for managing and coordinating projects, conferences such as this, and meetings, and cuts across a lot of divisions in the agency, obviously. Dr. Smith also serves as the agency's Alternative Dispute Resolution Manager and Coordinator for negotiating rulemaking. In this role, she's responsible for managing the agency's consensus-based rulemaking process in collaboration with stakeholders. She has taught communication courses at the University of Texas at Austin and at St. Edward's University. Prior to her employment with the Coordinating Board, Dr. Smith spent 13 years working in healthcare organizations, with 9 of those years serving in direct patient care positions. Dr. Smith holds a PhD in Communication Studies and Certificate in Dispute Resolution, a Master's of Arts degree in Speech Communication, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Psychology, all from the University of Texas at Austin. Monique Whitley is the Program Director, Coordinator, and Lead Facilitator for the Texas Emergency Aid Network, a group of higher education representatives formed by the Coordinating Board with private grant support to research, discuss, and disseminate, promote promising and best practices for colleges and universities-based emergency aid programs. Whitley brings over 30 years of experience in management, administration, and customer service to her current role at the Coordinating Board. Immediately before joining the Coordinating Board staff, Coordinator Whitley lived and worked in Houston, where she was a College Access and Success Advisor and Project Coordinator for Project Grad Houston. She also has spent about almost 6 years in the Office of Financial Aid at Lone Star College in Tomball. Ms. Whitley received her Associate of Arts degree in Liberal Arts from the Lone Star College and graduated with a Bachelor of Applied Sciences from the College of Public Affairs and Community Service at the University of North Texas. So we welcome the panel.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. It's my pleasure to be here, and on our panel we have Dr. Ira Blake, the President of the University of Houston Clear Lake, Mr. Billy Hamilton, the Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer for the Texas A&M University System, and Dr. Richard Rhodes, the President and CEO of Austin Community College. Dr. Ira Blake is the University of Houston Clear Lake's 5th president. She joined UH Clear Lake in August of 2017 after having served as the Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs since 2009 at Bloomsburg University of Pennsylvania, which is one of 14 regional institutions of Pennsylvania's state higher education system. She's also served as a faculty member at Susquehanna University in Pennsylvania and at Teachers College in Columbia. At Teachers College at Columbia University. She received her bachelor's degree in psychology from George Washington University, a master's degree in educational psychology from San Francisco State University, which I actually attended back in the early 80s, and as well as a master's degree and doctorate in developmental psychology from Columbia. Billy Hamilton, as the Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer of Texas A&M's system, is the Chief Financial Officer for one of the largest systems of higher education in the nation, the statewide network of 11 universities, 7 state agencies, 2 service units, and a comprehensive health science center. Prior to his current position, Hamilton was a consultant in tax, fiscal policy, and related issues. And before that, Mr. Hamilton served as the Chief Deputy Controller of Public Accounts of Texas for 8 years and as the Deputy Controller for 7 years. He is a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin and the LBJ School of Public Affairs. Dr. Richard Rhodes joined the Austin Community College District as president back in September of 2011 after serving as the president of El Paso Community College for 10 years and as the vice president of business services at Salt Lake Community College in Salt Lake City, Utah for 7 years. He's a native of New Mexico, and he received his Bachelor of Business Administration in Accounting and a Master of Arts in Educational Management and Development from New Mexico State University. He earned his doctorate through the Community College Leadership Program at UT Austin, and he is a certified public accountant both in Texas and in New Mexico. So before we begin our discussion, I'm here to actually just provide you a very brief overview of what emergency aid programs are and what we learned about their value and some promising and some best practices to help make them the most effective when we had a grant through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and we had our Texas Emergency Aid Project, which we're just finishing up now. As you're aware, socioeconomic status is the biggest predictor of educational attainment. It's not ethnicity, it's not race, it's family income. Surveys show that financial stress weighs heavily on many students, and unforeseen expenses, even those that are less than $300, might be enough to actually derail a student's career. Even a dead battery can seem like a catastrophic expense for a student and a family, so emergency aid can really be critical to help a student stay in their courses. The purpose of emergency aid programs is to direct small amounts of money to students who are struggling to pay for a financial emergency. The programs are often administered outside of the financial aid office, such as the Dean of Students Office, Student Affairs, and some one-stop shop departments, or through a foundation that actually supports the institution. Common forms of aid includes emergency loans and grants, campus vouchers, food pantries, and completion scholarships. But wherever they might be housed, emergency aid programs are designed to support students in meeting unexpected financial needs and help them stay on the path to graduation. So the idea of the Emergency Aid Project has been to identify and then actually disseminate best practices and approaches in emergency aid programs and to spotlight the exemplar programs in our state. The project began back in November of 2016, as I said, with grant support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's had 4 phases. In phase 1, we sent a survey to all of our colleges, all of our private and public colleges and universities here in Texas, so that we could get a deeper understanding about what emergency aid practices are in our own state. And then based on those survey results, and ensuring, of course, a diversity of representation across our state, we invited 10 Texas public higher education institutions that had significant underrepresented minority populations and existing emergency aid programs to participate in the Emergency Aid Network, which we dubbed the EANet. The idea was to form a group of key campus administrators to operate as a learning community and help identify and then disseminate the strategies and best practices and then advocate for effective approaches to emergency aid programs. Each of the 5-person teams, actually 4 to 5 person teams, was chosen by their presidents, and they represented departments such as student affairs and financial aid and others. All of the institutions that we invited to participate did accept our invitation. As you can see, there's a lot of diverse institutions that are shown there on this map. The first meeting of the EANet was held in June of 2017. The members met bi-monthly, either in person or virtually. And now Ms. Monique Whitley, our lead facilitator and coordinator of the EANet, is going to provide you an overview of what we learned from the project before she begins the discussion of the emergency aid programs with some of the leaders of our institutions that actually have them on their campuses. Monique?
Thank you, Mary. So you see the members of the EANet are hard at work here, and over the last 15, 16 months, in order to further study necessary program components, the EANet was divided into subgroups, which you can see on this slide, and institutions, here we go. Institutions need these components for successful emergency aid programs. So what did we learn over the last 15, 16 months? Well, for number one, they clearly define emergency. They should do it with consideration for flexibility and criteria and eligibility. Institutions currently have many rules surrounding financial aid, but emergency aid is not financial aid, and even disaster aid has its own rules and regulations, but no rules or statutes currently exist specifically for emergency aid in higher education. That's why the definition of emergency aid is so critical to the process. For number 2, institutions should develop an EA program manual and train both staff and faculty on process to ensure consistency of program policies and procedures. They should also collect and store data for tracking, evaluation, funding, and sustainability. For number 3, advertise widely. Diversify the outreach to students using phone, text, email, social media, etc. Reach the students in the modes that they're most used to. For number 4, housing, transportation, childcare, and food were the most common needs reported. So institutions should consider partnering with federal, state, and local public entities, as well as private industry, for instance, with Health and Human Services, or HUD, for the mental health and housing piece, and then with CAP Metro or local food banks for the transportation and food insecurity issues. We also learned that co-location of social services on campuses can help students better access the services they need. Regional partnerships with wraparound services and providers would be ideal. For number 5, use automated technology. You heard Tim Rennick in his speech earlier talk about chatbot technology, right? Whenever and wherever appropriate and doable, use these methods. Besides lessening administrative burden for staff, many students are too embarrassed to walk in and receive needed services. So these online applications and mobile apps really help to break down these barriers. Artificial intelligence, like the chatbot technology, can be used for tracking, distribution, and outreach to students in the format that they are most used to. Institutions should always combine touch and tech, which brings us to number 6, creating a culture of caring. Institutions can combine touch by using apps for the first mode of contact and for early alerts, but also retain the human touch through caring staff, faculty, and student mentors to cultivate a campus culture that says we care about our students' needs. So I think these statements say it all, right? It's about loving the student that we have. That emotional, social connection. So, and now I will pose a question to each of the panelists. The selected panelists will respond, and after the response and presentation, we will take a few moments, or a few questions from the audience. So, my first question is for President Rhodes of Austin Community College. Dr. Rhodes, at our recent statewide convening on emergency aid, we heard President Lowry Hart of Amarillo College say how we should love the students we have and not the students we wish we had, if we're going to cultivate a campus-wide culture of caring. Tell us how ACC is creating this type of culture and why.
Okay. You know, first of all, how many of us realize that life gets in the way of educational pursuits? How many of us have had that struggle at some time in our past in getting to where we need to go? And recognizing that and bringing it back home and understanding that is the most critical piece. What's important here is the engagement of passionate faculty and staff. And how do you engage them in this effort? And we've got people like Dr. Melissa Curtis here, who is passionate and makes sure that, you know, that is one of the most critical elements in what she does. You know, she's in charge of enrollment management, but she's so passionate about how students need the help to be successful. You know, and it may just be a little bit of help. It may be that the car broke down, but something as small as that can cause them to walk away and never come back to higher education. And we see that time and time again. And it may be the fact that they enrolled for classes last semester and they intended to pay all of it. They were on a time payment plan, and they get to the new semester, something got in the way. Maybe it was childcare that they couldn't afford, they had to take care of. And as a result, they can't pay what they owed from the previous semester, and it may be as low as $50. And so how do you help that student get back into class? Because historically what we've done is said if you owe anything from a prior semester, you can't register again. And then you count the numbers of students who are in that category, and you look at some of those different stresses there. And it may be $50, maybe $150. So how do you deal with that? Sure, I get the right one here. So it is passionate faculty and staff, and it is also the support of the Board of Trustees or the Board of Regents to make sure that, that you can support those types of efforts. But if I were to boil it down into 3 different things, I would say number 1, it is commitment. And that is ACC decided to establish, a broad strategy. And oftentimes what you find in different innovations and strategies like that is you have some different silos throughout an organization or throughout a community. And it's tying all of those together into one broad strategic plan. Next is evaluation. So can you take a look at what you're doing and evaluate that? Is it actually making a difference in student life? So is it saving them money? Is there a return on investment for the student? Is there a return on the investment for the institution? And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then third is we know that we can't do this by ourselves at ACC, that it requires partnerships. And so we have to leverage those partnerships to help meet the needs of the students in our community. So one of the things that, if you take a look at the next slide, what we've done is try to pull these different resources together. And as an example, we've got our foundation, and our foundation does some fundraising throughout the year to raise money to put into the foundation specifically designated for emergency aid for students. And so they do things like they have we have a golf event, and all of the proceeds from that go into emergency aid for our students. Then we've got internally allocated funds that can go towards that. We've got foundation support from Trellis Foundation that goes directly to the college to assist our students. And then we've got a partnership with the City of Austin for utility bills. And so all of those, pulling all of those together so that we have one unified online application as opposed to students going to each one of those different agencies or access points. And so last year we had $149,000 worth of additional support to students, and that's just in aid itself. But one of the other things that we did during that year, this past year, is we actually tripled the amount of internally allocated funds from $100,000 to $300,000, and that was specifically for child care. And so we do child care vouchers. And so that is in addition to what students qualify through Workforce Solutions, and in addition to any externally funded child care funding that comes in for CTE students. So you pull all of that together so that you have one consistent strategy to reach out to all of your students. The other thing that we did during this year is we're opening a drop-off child care facility at one of our campuses. And we're going to do this as a pilot, working with the YMCA. So we will provide the space, and we're doing the renovation work. It'll be open for the spring semester. And then the YMCA is going to actually operate that child care center. So that is really just a drop-off. It's not a normal, 8-hour-a-day child care facility, but it's when students get into a bind and, something happens and their child care provider can't take them, or the mother or, the grandmother who normally watches them gets sick and they just need somebody for one day, or they need to go to a different campus and they need to take tests and they need somebody to watch the child for just a little while. So that happens at that facility. So what we do is we take a look at 4 different measurements because it's more than just giving them the money, but it's taking a look at is it equitably distributed? It is revenue. Does this lead to persistence? And we'll show a slide on that. And then engagement in activity. We had the Boston Consulting Group actually do an external evaluation of our emergency aid program. And basically the bottom line is that for every dollar that we give out in emergency aid, we get $3 back. So it triples. If you take a look at the makeup of our student population, you'll see that currently today 36% of our population is Hispanic. Those who are receiving emergency aid, 35% of those who receive it are Hispanic, and you can see the numbers throughout. African American, 7% of our population, 29% are in EA recipients. One of the amazing things when you look at this chart too is 55% of our student population is female, 76 are actually under EA recipients, and the largest number of those are single parents, head of households. So persistence makes a difference. And fall, what we looked at is fall to 17 to spring 18 persistence rates. And you know, our general student population in fall to spring is 69%. For those who received emergency aid, it was 82%. Spring to fall persistence was 55%, and you see 63% persistence rate for those who received emergency aid. So when we take a look at the culture itself, it is not just the administration supporting it, but it's got to be filtered throughout the entire organization. So faculty champions, and how do you get the word out to students about the availability of this? And you've got to do it through more than just sending out, making posters or just sending out emails, but it's got to be incorporated within things such as a syllabus, and you've got to be intentional about how you access and provide that opportunity for students to understand what this is available to them and how they apply for it. Other things that we're doing, and actually we just started this, is with the Texas Food Bank. And just in this past semester, we had drop-off locations on one of our campuses. We're expanding it to 2 campuses starting this spring. But I think it was over 8,000 pounds of food delivered just off of one campus to students and those in the surrounding neighborhood. It is, we did earlier I talked about it could be as low as $50 that a student owes, and that has kept them from re-enrolling. We have done away with that. So, if they owe $50 or less, they get to continue to re-enroll. Through AYOC, the Opportunity Youth, we have loans or we have aid given through the community of up to $150. So in closing on what I'm talking about is just to look at, the end result, the evaluation is what happens to the students and what do they see. And so here's a statement by one of our students who happens to be, a single mother, a head of household, who ran into some problems and needed just that little bit of help to keep going. And this is what it does. This is what it does to students. And so it is up to us to make sure that we get the word out, that we get more students who have that opportunity, that we get more partners in to assist our students. And that's what we're committed to, that's what we're dedicated to, and hope this has been helpful.
And now we'll take a couple of questions from the audience if everyone has a question. For Dr. Rhodes? Yes.
Dr. Rhodes, the food bank program that you guys have going on, is that under your emergency aid or is it administered separately?
It's contained within, the same department, so that we coordinate everything that we're doing. So even the child care, we're doing the same thing.
Right. Yes, Mr. Stedman.
So the one return, so help me explain what that is.
The 3-to-1? Yeah. So return on investment, and the way that the Boston Consulting Group looked at it is, if you prevent a student from returning because they haven't received the emergency aid necessary, they're gone. And and so they have lost revenue, which is a different thing, but the ROI that they calculate for ACC is the fact that if you can keep them and have them persist through, then it returns 3-to-1.
Through tuition?
Yes, yes.
Yes. One more question? Yes.
I was just wondering if you had any kind of partnership with Capital Metro in terms of transportation.
Yes, and I failed to mention that. I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, this year, all of our students, faculty and staff, get free Cap Metro passes. So, we have 11 campuses, and it is important because sometimes we can't offer all of the high-cost career pathways like nursing on every single campus. So we have those currently on 2 campuses. Soon we'll have them on 3. But they're going to need, depending on where they live, where they work, where the child care facility is that they use, or grandmother, they're going to need transportation around. And so our Board of Trustees made a commitment that this year, and our relationship with Cap Metro, is that we're providing free bus passes or light rail.
Yes. Yes. Dr. Ferris.
More economical as your board studied about having your own shuttle buses. I know your area, Austin, covered a lot of big areas. Have you studied an analysis of that?
I missed that.
Yeah, he was asking whether or not it would be more beneficial to have shuttle buses.
For us, it's not. Cap Metro already has the system in place, and so it's more economically feasible for us. We've looked at shuttle buses, but the numbers of times that we would have to go from campus to campus, and because of the 11 campuses, it's more economically to provide the bus passes.
Yes. And I had a comment. I know your support center uses case managers, right?
Yes.
To work with these students. And this is just how doable this program is. Their case managers move around to all ACC's campuses. So, you may be saying, oh, we can't have this support center, we don't have the funds for that. But they use their case managers and they rotate them around. So, totally doable. All right, so we're going to move on, and we'll move on to President Blake of University of Houston Clear Lake. Dr. Blake, as you are aware, University of Houston Central was one of the 10 institutions on the EANet. One of the most frustrating issues that we discovered during the project was the lack of policy surrounding and specific to emergency aid in higher education. My question to you is, if you had just 5 minutes alone with our Texas legislators, what would you say to them to impress upon them good things. What would you say to them to impress upon them the importance of and the need for support for emergency aid programs, and why?
Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, what I'd like to do is to thank Dr. Smith and Ms. Whitley for giving me this opportunity to address emergency needs of students. I've only been in the system for 15 months, so it's given me an opportunity to take inventory at my university. Looking at those aid programs, I've tried to look at what they are, what the resources are that are connected to them, the methods of informing the students about their availability, and then how long each aid program has been in existence. But going back to your question, Ms. Whitney, okay, I'm going to basically set up the context for what I discovered at my university, which again, remember, I'm 15 months in. First and foremost, talking to a legislator, I'd say that Texas has committed to 60 by 30 in order to increase the number of needed credentialed residents. That this goal is intended to address the workforce needs of the important industries in Texas, as well as the quality of life across Texas communities. If one goes to the Office of the State Demographer, we find that the projections are that the Hispanic population will surpass the Anglo population by 2020 and make up a majority of the state by 2042. And much of that population growth would be around urban centers, such as Harris County, which is where I reside. I want you to keep in mind that when I talk about the student population of UH Clear Lake, it's representative of what the demographic changes are like. So when we look at minority groups, we also know that they tend to be disproportionately higher in levels of low income. They have access to fewer resources, and their family histories have a lower educational attainment. So if Texas is serious about having a greater impact on the credentialing of Texans under the 60 by 30 plan, then finding emergency aid is a necessity, and I will give you some indications of how that is. Let's see if I can make this correct. Okay. What I want to say going out is that the outcome of my review of the inventory is a little bit disappointing to me. But as with most disappointments, there are usually at least some thin silver linings, so I will mention a few of those. I'll begin with a little background about UH Clear Lake, and I will keep it short. If you have any additional information you want, I can tell you about that. It was established in 1974 to meet some needs that were professed by NASA JSC and the surrounding high-tech industry. What happened is the institution evolved into meeting the needs of biotech, healthcare, business, and also some societal challenges that happen in the greater metropolitan area. I can talk about a couple of those if you'd like to hear. The overriding goal is to send forward competent, confident, and caring graduates who are going to contribute to the workplaces, to their families, and also to the communities that they are in. Concerned about productivity and also in the workplace, and then prosperity in the communities, and then also mobility in the lives of individuals. So in essence, our desired impact is both to transform the personal lives of our students and to advance the communities in which they live. What we found out is that we produce 68%, we have about 68,000 alumni, and 87% of them reside in our region. So we have a great impact in that regard. If I look at UHCL, this past fall's enrollment was historic, 9,040 students. We have a federal designation of Hispanic serving. We've had that for almost a decade. 35% of the population, student population, are self-identifying as Hispanic. 38% is white, 10% is black, 8% is Asian, 6% is international. We became a full four-year university in 2014, so much of what I'm going to tell you is from that point forward, 4 years ago, going into our 5th year. So we have an increasing number of first-time in college students expectedly, okay, but many more of them over these 4 years have been going part-time. That means they're taking less than 12 credit hours per semester, and we've also seen a 20% decline in those taking 15 credits per term, which means that they're not going to be on board for timely graduation in 4 years. We've also seen since 2014 a 22% increase in Pell-eligible students, and those are students who are low income with financial need in pursuing an undergraduate degree. To further look at our intent for a meaningful impact, what we've done is we've developed some new full degree programs to service the needs that we've discovered in our workforce area, as well as interest on students. I won't mention what those 10 programs are since 2014, but if you'd like to know, I can tell you later. What I want to talk about is the increase in the cost of education. Since we became a full undergraduate university, our tuition and fees have increased about 19% for Texas residents. That's from $7,131 to $8,500. So the total cost of attendance has gone up about 5%. That's from $19,571 to $20,464. This is for students who are living with a parent. And if you listen to President Rhodes, $50 can make the difference in someone being able to complete. Okay, looking to different units on campus, the Division of the Student Affairs, looking at the Dean of Students Office, also our enrollment management, I was able to identify 4 emergency aid programs, only 2 of which were in existence before I arrived. The other 2 are an outgrowth of the disaster relief needed for Hurricane Harvey. So the first one is the Emergency Loan Program, which began in 2003. The critical facts are on the slide. What isn't on the slide is the fact that the program has no permanent base funding. That's institutional or nor endowment. And if students receiving funds are unable to repay, then that produces fewer funds for students who may need them in the future. At this point in time, the current balance is $13,000, and without replacement, based on the current tuition and fees, 12 students with short-time financial need would be able to be helped. The other program that was in existence before I came is the Crisis Awareness Response Emergency Team. It's known as the CARE Team on campus. It was established in 2007. It's basically a partnership between the Dean of Students Office and the Counseling Center. They work with some other members on campus, other units as needed, depending on what students' emergency needs are. Those areas are the University Forest Apartments, which are on the edge of campus, the Financial Aid Office, faculty in the departments of mental health counseling and clinical psychology, school psychology, and the Office of Student Business Services. Some examples of emergency assistance that they've provided has to do with home insecurities. They have a referral case management service program whereby the institution has funded a social worker, which has just made a tremendous difference in terms of accessing community services beyond the university. And it was mentioned by President Rhodes, gift cards from H-E-B, grocery, and Barnes & Noble bookstore. Since Harvey, what has happened is the work of the students in terms of creating disaster relief for Harvey is translated into the Dean of Students Food Pantry. It was an amazing thing to experience. 25 days into my tenure here is when Harvey came for the visit. The donations for the Harvey relief effort were really large, so there was some excess left over. Students worked with the Dean of Students Office to find a location to put those goods, and that became the Dean of Students Food Pantry. So needless to say, space, goods, staffing are all not permanently funded, and so we're very much concerned about the ability to continue that. Since the beginning of the fall term, we've had 23 students already go there seeking food. The fourth, again, an outgrowth of Harvey, is the Hawk Emergency Grant Fund. Again, funds were raised to help students as a result of a hurricane, At that point in time, the awards were anywhere from $200 to $2,000, depending on the severity of the circumstances reported by the students. Since the spring of 2018, the conversion has gone to the Hawk Emergency Grant Fund. Of course, there's no permanent funding for this either, so what was left over is what's being utilized. They've capped the funds at $250, and the need must be quite extenuating. At this point in time, the current balance is 8,300 students, and if we look at $250 per student, we can assist 33 students. Again, our intention is to have positive, productive impact on the lives of students in the communities in which they live. Unfortunately, like other colleges and universities, we've found that there are students who are one personal crisis away from stopping out or dropping out. I want to give you a couple of personal stories that were provided to me by the Dean of Students so that we can reflect on the impact of not having adequate emergency aid or an absence of it at a university. The first is something that is clearly troubling my Dean of Students. He feels it's an opportunity that he missed. This was a couple of years before Hurricane Harvey, where a male student came to his office with an emergency need that needed to be immediately and directly dealt with because it affected the student's ability to perform academically. The student sought assistance with replacing his broken eyeglasses. The student explained that he really needed them to complete his out-of-class work assignments, to take legible notes, or read exams. At the same time, the dean said they had no identified emergency resources to assist the student. The student said that if he could not figure out how to pay for the glasses, he probably wouldn't be able to return. The dean lost contact with that student. Years later, it's still troubling him. Second has to do with a male student who's working to put himself through college. These are their words. The Dean of Students' office, when they help someone, they ask them to provide them with the impact. And I quote, "I'm just a student struggling with financial aspects while trying not to drown in debt, as most students are. I worked really hard to get myself to the point that I can attend university. It has been a long 10 years. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do whatever it takes to keep myself here. I want a degree with all my heart and soul. This grant will greatly help me do so. Go Hawks." And the final one is a student, a female, who aged out of foster care. "I've been here at UHCL for 4 years now. I graduate in December of 2018. So far, it has been a great experience where the challenges have allowed for personal growth and an education. Up until fall 2017 semester, I was struggling on my own and felt I had little support. Since Christy, UHCL's foster care liaison, which works with the social worker, has been appointed, I've received help with food kits and a gift card for fresh produce at a local HEB when I was low on food. I also received a backpack and a few school supplies in which I needed, since I've been using the same backpack for 8 years and it's falling apart. Christy has also provided me with emotional support as well as campus resources that I had previously forgotten or didn't know that an office could provide me help with. I can now receive assistance and support in applying for and preparing for a master's program. So the silver lining here, let me summarize it for you. I'm now aware of the increasing need, the minimal communication to students, or the type and amount of resources available to assist them, and the manner in which we have attempted to manage these funds to date. If we want students who experience emergencies to continue and to graduate, we must identify sustainable resources to assist them. What we've done is we've taken a couple of first actions. We've launched our public phase of our 2020 campaign last spring, And as a result, we've added emergency grants as a solicitation area. For our Giving Tuesday would just happen, that initiative, the ability to direct one's donations to emergency grants was added. And we will be including a comprehensive review of the need for student emergency aid during our strategic planning process, which begins this spring. I'd like to thank you for your time.
And in the interest of time, we'll take the questions for Dr. Blake after. Again, the story about the glasses and the counseling center, those are just great opportunities to form those partnerships with your private industry people, and also the counseling center that provides internship opportunities for those social work students. My last question, and certainly not least, is for Mr. Hamilton of the Texas A&M system. And Mr. Hamilton, you recently announced Texas A&M System's new Board of Regents grants for emergency aid that are designed to help students overcome unexpected financial hardships. Please explain more about the grant program, how the regents were able to design this initiative, and what advice you can give to other regent boards wanting to follow suit.
Well, thank you. That's about the best definition of a softball question ever. She not only has seen my slides, she helped me put them together. So. Well, it's a pleasure for me to be here and to hear this. I spent my career at the controller's office, and I thought there'd be wild cheers for the controller. And we have the sort of tentative relationship with higher education that I imagine the coordinating board does, in the sense that we're a central control agency and we regulate them. So we forever made, system-wide, statewide accounting policy, and then they would sit busily to work exempting themselves from it. So it was kind of novel for me to come over, and it's been a real experience to see what our various campuses do in the area of financial aid. And all of them are a little bit different, because a lot of these schools in the A&M system have very different socioeconomic profiles. We have a historically black college, we have a huge university, the flagship, we have schools that cater a lot to the military in Central Texas. We have, heavily lower income, middle income schools. So we're everywhere. But one of the things that several of our schools shared was they were touched, and certainly the kids at every one of our schools were touched by Hurricane Harvey. And the system was highly involved in that. We managed response for the state. The chancellor was made commissioner of the Governor's Commission to Rebuild Texas. So we're intimately aware of the impact that was having on people's lives. And I think in the mind of our board, that came together with another series of observations, which I think are general observations that Board of Regents tend to have. And one of those is higher education is essential for the future of young people today. Costs are rising, and they're very conscious of what a squeeze that puts on many families. That there are circumstances in many people's lives, whether caused by the economy or natural disaster, like Harvey, that really kind of throws a wrench in people who are just barely clearing the bar. And that, they wanted to do something in addition to what the individual universities were doing to try to fill that gap. And so these are very simple slides. So, unanticipated issues, medical emergencies, job loss, or natural disaster. And I think at the basis of this, you know, just from listening to this presentation and hearing the financial aid people talk as we talked about creating this grant program, is really a concept which I, you know, as an elderly person, sometimes think we're lacking in our society, and that is the concept of simple decency. People have troubles, and I think that it is the tradition of Texas. It's certainly the tradition of Texas A&M and the A&M system, and it's the tradition of most neighborhoods to offer a helping hand. And our idea was that we would have a helping hand. So, you know, help students stay in school. Now, there's an economic underlying reason there. We've already heard about that. But the critical thing is to help these people stay in school. You know, I can't say through whatever means necessary, because there are some that do, we hear, the board hears, there are some that take out financial aid and go buy a truck and things like that. But most of our students, I believe, are very serious about getting an education. And it is a pivotal moment in their lives, because the economy is not the same today as certainly it was when I was a young person. So that's a big issue. So I think you have probably in your packet, yeah, I can, oh, in the back. I didn't write on every single one of them, so.
You can pick it up on your way out. It's on the table in the back.
But just to sort of go over very briefly what the Regents decided to do. They decided to set aside some money, $3 million over 5 years, to take care of unforeseen emergencies at our schools. You have to be a resident undergraduate. They are generally small grants. The ones that I've seen range from $50, $60 up to about $4,400. You have to be in good academic standing. The original structure of the program was for families with incomes between $60,000 and $100,000, which, you know, every time I've said that, it sounds kind of odd. It was odd explaining the idea to the board when we presented our ideas to them. But the idea is that people who make less than that have more ready access to financial aid, and people who make more than that have more financial resources. I honestly think we're going to go back and re-examine that and make the process eventually more flexible, because I'm not 100% sure you can define emergency or define one of these clink, you know, glitch in the system situations by looking at someone's balance sheet. And I think there are students who make less money that have problems, and there are probably some that make more than $100,000 that make money. I thought, you know, if I ever made $100,000, I would be the richest guy in the world. Then I did. And I found out that if you have kids, that's not, you know, that's a good salary, but it's not a great salary. So in any case, the system allocates the money. It's a system-wide initiative. We do it based on the distribution of Pell Grants. We were just lacking, you know, some sort of measure to allocate the money. So, the different schools get different amounts. A&M University, the flagship, obviously gets the most, and it sort of goes on down to Texarkana, you know, which has a little over 2,000 students and like that. And you know, we are early in the process. We are not financial aid experts. We're also not educational experts, as our friends at the university remind us all the time. You know, but I think the Regents are sincere in wanting to help. So I looked at a kind of distribution of the grants that have been made so far. You know, I would say that the average grant runs $500 to $2,500. And almost all of them have something to do with job loss or economic hiccups of one kind or another. And you know, unfortunately, even in this economy, as strong as it seems to be, in general, that is something that happens a lot. So, you know, we're testing this out. We like to hear ideas from other people, and I'd be interested to take these ideas back so that we can make this information available, because, you know, the many great things higher ed does, this is the sort of thing that can be a real boost when somebody needs help. And again, it kind of comes back to simple decency. Thank you.
Okay. Can I do the questions? Okay. All right. So we'll go back to Dr. Blake. If anyone had a question for Dr. Blake, we can take those now. I just wanted to mention that, you know, President Rhodes started off with life happens, right? And every day our students are faced with these choices, especially there's nationally 26% of all students are single parents. And if their child gets sick, they're going to have to make a choice, tuition or a doctor bill, right? Which one would you choose? And these students that are not in these classes and they're having to drop out for these small dollar amounts, it's totally worth it. Dr. Blake told us about the stories, you know, the impact of these small dollar grants, what they have on their students. And Billy told us about, you know, what it was like then and then what it's like now. Our students have different choices now. And they're very hard choices. Dr. Smith and I would like to thank our panelists and all of you here for participating in this discussion and using emergency aid programs to assist in reaching the goals of 60 by 30 Techs. And this final slide shows where you can find more information on the Emergency Aid Network. And if you had any other questions that you didn't think of maybe today, send me your questions and I'll do my best to get them answered. Again, all these presentations will be available on your flash drive and also on the conference website. We also, the Texas Higher Education Foundation is offering mini grants to those institutions that want to start an emergency aid program or maybe improve their program currently. And the deadline for that application is December 10th, quickly approaching. Some of your institutions may already be aware of it, but if you're not, the applications are on the back table and I encourage you to take one. Thank you very much.
That was wonderful.